Welcome, we're joined by Mikayel Hovhannisyan. Mikayel has been working to develop civil society in Armenia for over 18 years and is currently at the Eurasian Partnership Foundation. Mikayel, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
So in terms of democracy and human rights and the 2020 Karabakh War, do you think Armenia is now in a state of regression? What do you think the war meant for Armenia's development in terms of these things?
Well, obviously, I think Armenia is in regression now, but what will follow depends on our own activities. It depends on how we rethink the situation, how we organize ourselves, how we plan our future in light of the recent changes. Because I think that this war, apart from being a disaster, a huge problem for our country, is also a turning point that allows us to, reflect, rethink who we are, where we're standing, and in what direction we shall move. So, what will follow this problem, a critical crisis situation, depends on how we organize ourselves.
And there is a political crisis at the moment in Armenia, and I was wondering how you think this should be resolved. Obviously, the government is now pushing for snap parliamentary elections. What do you think about this?
Well, I think that the political crisis is much deeper than both the authorities and the political opposition are perceiving. And it is not going to be resolved simply by changing the opposition and the authorities with each other, the places. Because I think that both the opposition and the authorities are part of this crisis, and the entire society is part of this crisis. And the only way to effectively come out of this crisis is to consolidate properly, to organize properly, and to set proper priorities. And I think that, again, snap elections cannot be perceived as a target, as a name, but rather as part of the solution. It is even not an entire solution, it's only a tiny part of it. And without properly thinking and planning the rest part of the way out, I don't think that the snap elections or any other political mechanism will result in any significant change. What needs to be done is very comprehensive, very consolidated rethinking process and very organized process of defining the priorities and the way towards those priorities.
And obviously, after the November 9th agreement was signed, several opposition groups started a series of street protests. Many think, though, that these protests didn't really gain momentum. At the same time, there is many people in Armenia who are in between these groups and the current authorities that feel that they don't really have any political representation. How do you think this frustration can evolve into a proper political movement that has proper representation?
Well, on one hand, I think that frustration that you have described is not something new for Armenia. We have been in such a frustration for quite a long period of time before the 2018 revolution. So the society has a long experience of being underrepresented in the authorities. And this unfortunately means that one of the possible outcomes is that the society will return to its more apathic condition with no significant links to the decision makers and decision making processes on the state level. This is one and I would say worst case scenario. As for the more optimistic one, I think that there are obviously processes going on in the society of consolidating, developing some new groups that approach in formulating some new logic of behavior in the political arena. But this processes obviously take time, and the question here is whether we have that time or not. And we have also the situation where neither of the existing political forces or even existing political consolidations can properly address the problems we're facing currently, which means that what Armenia needs is a significantly wider consolidation, wider joint efforts to overcome the situation. Also, I would like to say that apart from addressing this relatively shorter term issues, we need to focus on a longer term goals that would allow us to again rethink the short term objectives more properly. What I mean by this is that this whole crisis this past year, including both the corona outbreak and the war, has illustrated several very significant problems for Armenia, which primarily relate to two main issues. One is the extremely big amount of problems within the state organization system, and the other is related to knowledge, education, connections with the world, and the perception of the role of Armenia in that world and its relations with it. So in a longer term perspective, I think that if we succeed in addressing these goals, we'll be able to more properly define the shorter term goals in this respect.
Do you think at the moment democracy is at stake in Armenia?
Well, democracy is always at stake, I think, and in case of Armenia particularly, now it is, yes, obviously also due to the ongoing processes, because we clearly can say that the current struggle for power goes on between the current authorities and the so-called 17 plus or age 16 plus. I'm already confused in numbers, but and the opposition that is active currently is represented by the people from the former government mainly, who are perceived by the society as extremely corrupt and as part of the problems that we're facing now. So and this situation is endangering democratic processes in Armenia, obviously, and also there is a manipulative logic of compare or putting independency the issue of security and the issue of democracy, saying that if we need security, we need to sacrifice at least partly the democracy, or vice versa. Meanwhile, I think this is a complete manipulation, and I think that these two are conditioning each other and strongly connected with each other, and they cannot be put in an either-or relation.
And the Eurasian Partnership Foundation and yourself have also been involved in peace building. And I thought this was interesting because there's talk now about transport corridors and normalization agreements, but has much been done really to prepare the populations for peace? And in your opinion, what needs to be done for that to be achieved?
Well, unfortunately and obviously, the answer is negative. I mean that throughout these years, the efforts towards preparing the societies for peace have been not enough. Otherwise, we wouldn't have war. Because if the societies want peace and want peaceful resolution of the problems between them, they one of their primary aims is to undertake every single step to avoid any escalation. But on another hand, while speaking about what needs to be done to prepare currently after the war, where the wounds are still open, when people are still thinking counting the loss is extremely problematic, which means that the processes that are going on now in terms of the deblockading, making some clarifications in terms of the borderline, etc., etc., are less connected to the peace rather to setting up the post-war situation. So I think what needs to be done now is to stabilize situation first, to create an environment and then to resolve issues. And this is obviously a two-way street, which means that we cannot perceive that these efforts need to come from one side only. It obviously need to come from both sides. And another thing here is that it is, and this war also illustrated that, and since we have been in both conditions, as a winning side and as a losing side, that in order to be more effective in peacemaking, it's much easier to talk from the point of view of the strength. But we have missed that opportunity currently, unfortunately. And we need to understand also how our behavioral mode should change in light of these changes, and how we should approach to the peace, to the relations, etc., etc. Because we are in a completely different, completely new situation, which still needs to be rethought by ourselves, and our approaches and understanding of the entire situation needs to be changed.
Well, Mikayel, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.